The Swedish Public Health Agency has often said that wait a year and we'll see if the other Nordic countries don't sort of surpass Sweden. They will never surpass Sweden. I mean, per capita, Denmark has 5 times less, and Norway and Denmark 10 times less deaths. There's no way they're going to catch up. I want to say a few things because a lot of issues have been brought up in the last few minutes. The first thing is the reason people in general think there are many reasons why people support the policy, and some of it is psychological, etc. But you have to understand that the people who have paid the price are mainly the 70 pluses. 90% of the people who have died are 70 plus, and a very large proportion in elder care, in care homes. So people don't necessarily sort of perceive the problem on a personal level. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing with regard to kids don't get very sick often, but they spread it. And one thing that you have to realize about Sweden, which is the most absurd thing about the Swedish policy at this point, is that there are a couple of things that virtually all other countries do and Sweden refuses to do. One of them is face masks. I mean, there are very few countries in the world. Last I heard, it was like Somalia and Yemen and Sudan and Sweden that don't either recommend or mandate face masks. There is an opposition to face masks in Sweden. And the other thing that, and the interesting thing is you don't even see face masks in hospitals. You go to the doctor, you go to the ophthalmologist, you sit this close to them, and they don't wear face masks. So that's one thing. The other thing that most countries in the world, or at least in Europe, have is quarantine for household contacts. In Sweden, it's the opposite. Until 2 weeks ago, it said on the webpage of the Public Health Agency, what do you do if someone in your family or your household has COVID-19? Answer, if you don't have symptoms, you go to school and you go to work as usual. Now they're talking about possibly in high problem areas like Stockholm, instituting home quarantine. But today, they said this will not affect the kids. The parents will stay at home, but the kids have to go to school. And there are parents who are in risk groups, and they have to send their kids to school. Even though they're talking about home quarantine, it doesn't apply to the kids.
Stefan Swartling Peterson, on the issue of face masks, is it true in Sweden you don't have to wear them?
No, you don't have to wear them. They're not mandatory. I carry one in my pocket, and which I'm prepared to put on when I'm on a train and it gets crammed. But if I'm walking alone in the street or in a sparsely or in a forest, as we tend to do in Sweden, I can't see why. There's no evidence that this face mask work, nor is there any evidence that it works in young kids. But certainly I agree with Lena. It would seem reasonable. That's why I carry this, and that's why there's recommendations in certain places in Sweden. I think we could do more on the face masks, and certainly there have been other mistakes. But in general, I think it's not all or nothing, and this is not about being for or against the authorities. I think we have to look at specific groups here, and my point is to say, not to defend the Swedish policy overall, but to say that something that Sweden has done very right, and we also heard the evidence before, is to keep schools open, because it is adults who give COVID to kids. It's not kids who give the COVID to adults. And children in Sweden didn't have to pay the price, but in Finland they paid the price. They have bad statistics on psychological distress, etc., and loneliness in their kids. And across the world,
even if you're in a household,
the price now.
Even if you're in a household, as Dr. Einhorn was saying, where you have parents that are in an at-risk group, should the kids be forced to go to school?
I don't have an opinion around that, and I think some of those obviously some of those recommendations may need to be modified. Similarly, if I was a 60-year-old teacher with diabetes and high blood pressure, I think we need some leniency and we need some adaptation there as well. But the point is we can't lock all kids at home. 850 million kids in the world still don't have a school to go to because some kids may have particular situations, because some teachers may be in a particular sensitive situation, because the kids are paying prices and they're paying a different price, which we are not counting. And COVID will not go to zero. We're here to live with COVID, and we need to live with it in a way that actually promises a future for our children, that they survive, that they thrive, and that there is a tomorrow. So that's my point.
And that brings us back to the point that Viviane Kovesmes-Petit made.
Can I just
very briefly, go ahead.
Can I just make a comment on? Yes, I mean this was not a very representative statement of the situation. I'm very happy that Stefan walks around with a face mask, but he's pretty alone doing it. I mean, I'm not saying nobody does it, but I don't see ever face masks in the streets of Sweden, and perhaps on public transport there are 5% maybe will wear face masks, but basically there's a stigma now around face masks in Sweden.
Catherine Norstrand, you confirm that?
Yeah, that fits in very much with what I saw in Stockholm, certainly a couple of weeks ago. You don't see any face masks around. So, not only they're not obligatory, they're not recommended. Public transport, you see a few, but not very many. There are a few people who are protesters calling for face masks to be introduced in Sweden, and they gather every Saturday and do a demonstration, but it's very small.
So wait, in Germany they have demonstrations against them, and in Sweden they have demonstrations for them.
They do, but they are small groups of campaigners at the moment. Right. Maybe it will grow, but it's a very different mindset, it feels.